It's been a dramatic week at the trial of former President Donald Trump. He's accused of falsifying records related to a payment to Stormy Daniels to keep quiet about a sexual encounter.
The adult film star herself spent 2 days on the witness stand this week. Joining us now to discuss the latest developments in this case is James Sample, professor at Hofstra Law. Mr. Sample, good to have you with us here once again. So what was your take on Stormy Daniels' testimony over the past 2 days?
Well, Chris and Mary, it's good to be with you again, and I think that this was a net win for the prosecution. It was something that was debated whether or not really to put Stormy Daniels on the stand. It wasn't always clear that they would really want to do that, but in the opening statements by the defense counsel reiterated what Donald Trump has contested all along, which is that this never happened, that there was no sexual encounter whatsoever. Once the defense went there basically was no choice but for the prosecutors to bring Stormy Daniels out, because otherwise you'd just have lawyers engaging in a he said, she said, as opposed to the individual parties themselves. And potentially Donald Trump has at least threatened that he might take the witness stand, in which he would have categorically denied that this occurred. So Stormy Daniels' account, and it was the exactitude of her details in her memory, the pajamas that Mr. Trump was wearing, the floor tile patterns, the gold nail clippers in his bathroom, the fact that at least in her testimony, Mr. Trump told her that she reminded him of his daughter right before they had sex. Those kinds of details add to the credibility of Stormy Daniels' allegation, and she's important to the overall context. Those are the details that Mr. Trump was trying to keep from coming out in the days leading up to the 2016 election. That's the heart of the case, even though this case is not a case about sex itself.
So in addition to Stormy Daniels' testimony, what else stood out to you in the case this week?
Well, Stormy Daniels was certainly the highlight, Mary, but the other aspect of the case, and the prosecution has gone with a kind of 1 day of, star witnesses, and then it's sort of alternating with custodial witnesses who bring in evidence, physical, tangible evidence. And in this week, I think the most critical piece of evidence was a bank statement of the LLC that Michael Cohen set up specifically to transmit the payment to Stormy Daniels. And on that bank statement, excuse me, there were handwritten notes of Alan Weisselberg indicating not just the $130,000 payment, but that payment should be grossed up, meaning that it should be doubled in order to account for the taxes that Michael Cohen would have to pay on that income. If those were legal fees, as Mr. Trump's defense contends, then there would have been absolutely no need for a gross up. That was as close to a smoking gun as you can come in a documents case.
So, James, the former president's approach, his entire legal team's approach, as you mentioned earlier, is to deny that this relationship, that this payment ever even happened. To take that approach now, and then, of course, after the trial each day, the president comes out and says, with this gag order, I can't respond. She can say all this about me. I can't say anything in return. He could actually answer any questions he wants answered if he took this stand. Do you see, is there any chance that his team would put him on the stand under oath?
That's a well-framed question, Chris, because one of the things that we know about Donald Trump is that he is never, ever reluctant to speak, except in the scenarios where he would be speaking under oath. I think it is the absolute Hail Mary pass of Hail Mary passes. We're talking 1 in 100 that he takes the stand. I think if you've followed Donald Trump's career, the question of how long could he survive on the witness stand without committing perjury, without lying under oath, I think the over-under on that would have to be set at minutes, not hours. And so I think there's no chance that he will do that. But I think that actually speaks to the underlying issue in this case, which is that Mr. Trump can say everything he wants to say in the court of public opinion. But in that courtroom, before those 12 jurors, while he only needs to persuade one of them, he's still facing a very tall task.
How much longer will we see this trial go on, Professor?
Mary, the judge has indicated that they're actually moving a little bit ahead of schedule, or at least on schedule, and in the estimate at this point is about 2 more weeks. Michael Cohen is clearly the biggest witness yet to come. The prosecution said yesterday they will not be calling Karen McDougal. I think they feel that they've established enough with regard to the kind of infidelity theme and the narrative by the Stormy Daniels testimony. So this is a documents case. We're going to hear from Michael Cohen at some point, and I think the defense has at this point, their strategy is to attack the credibility of the witnesses, and that's a fair strategy, but they don't have a counter narrative at this point.
Professor from Hofstra Law, James Sample, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us today. And stay with CBS News New York for complete coverage of the criminal trial of former President Donald Trump, and find the latest on our website at cbsnewyork.com.